Welcome back to the What We Do in the Shadows podcast on Nothing Notable. This week we're reviewing episodes 4 through 6. So let's start with just overall thoughts on these 3 episodes, and then we'll jump into the casino, if that's okay.
Yeah.
How did they compare to the first 3 episodes?
So I love the first episode of the season. I thought the second episode of the season was really great as well. And then the third episode was, it was sort of a middling, more mediocre episode. So for me, it was like 2 out of 3 really great episodes. And I feel the same way about this set. I think we got 2 out of 3 really great episodes and 1 episode that has some really nice moments, but overall is sort of more in the middle tier of what we do in the shadows. But those 2 episodes that we will talk about that I really love, I think are some of the best that the show has ever had. And surprisingly, the casino really has grown on me the second time I've watched it. And we'll dive into that shortly. But what were your thoughts on these 3 episodes?
Yeah, I feel similarly to you as well. I think I was higher on the casino at first because there's one line in it that made me laugh harder than I have in a long time. And we'll talk about it. And our boy Matt Berry says it. But yeah, overall it was fun. I think something these 3 episodes did really well was bringing back characters from previous seasons and episodes.
Yeah.
Like we were talking, it's like, what does What We Do in the Shadows want to be? Does it want to be more episodic, or does it want to be more narrative based? And I think with these 3 episodes, it balances it well.
Yes.
I love the return of one character in the last episode we'll watch, and we'll talk about him because he's just a joy to have on screen. But overall, I 2 out of 3, same this time. The lower tier one this time around, this review packet around, was better than I think Gale was.
Mm-hmm.
Gale was okay. Gale was probably my least favorite of the season so far. But let's jump into a fun one, the casino. This is season 3, episode 4. The vampires embark on a road trip from which they may never return. This was a really fun episode.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it right off the bat. I know you were kind of like, doesn't it seem like it could be better? And the thing is, yes, I think everything in your imagination's better than what comes to screen, but you rewatched it. I watched it once, but I really did enjoy it. I like the return of their neighbor, who is just like Laszlo's good friend, which is just always very funny. And we'll talk about a few bits there. And it felt very like classic, What We Do in the Shadows, classic sitcom. It was like, here's a plot device about their familial dirt that they've never talked about before, but they always put it under their coffins.
Right.
So it's like they have to bring that to the casino, and then that's the main plot point that Colin Robinson is too busy watching TV to notice that the maid just cleans up all of the dirt underneath. And then you get a fun thing with the vampires where they're just very tired for the most of the episode. And I don't know. I really liked this episode, and it was fun.
And what did we ask for in the last grouping of episodes? We wanted more Laszlo. We wanted more Nadja. And we got that in, I think, all 3 of these episodes, but especially in this one. It was a really good Nadja episode because her being tired is so goddamn funny. Every time she slumbers through a line reading, it's really, really good. And her whole thing with the Rat Pack is really funny. Ring a ding ding.
So funny.
Yeah. I think the first time I watched this episode, I really found it funny, but I was a little disappointed just because I thought there was so much that they could do. There was so much opportunity that it should have been made into a 2-parter. That was my only real gripe, was that I felt like it was a little bit too condensed, and they could have spread it out over 2 episodes. They could have had the first episode be all the way up to them realizing the dirt is gone and then having to send Guillermo out. And then the second episode could be all Guillermo out. And then the second half of the episode basically just taking place over the course of a full episode. And in that way, you could just have more of the fun stuff that you could do in a casino. And also just, the thing that I think the episode shortchanges is Guillermo out going and getting the dirt. Because it's all just super fast. And I thought that there was just opportunity to have some fun stuff happen there. So that was my only disappointment. But then watching it a second time, it didn't quite feel as condensed as I remembered it being from the first time. Still, I do think that it could have been helped by separating it into 2 parts. But what we got is still a really great episode of What We Do in the Shadows. And again, the more I watch it, the more I like it.
Yeah, there's even something missing, I think, personally, with the fact that they never once mentioned that there's no windows in a casino ever. So, like,
right,
they could literally just be going the whole day if they really wanted to. Because, like, you know, vampires can't go out in the sunlight or they'll burn. But, like, in a casino, they could literally stay up all day long and stuff. And, like, a little thing like seeing a buffet or like seeing like a breakfast would be kind of funny. And they're like, what is that? Like, because it's been so many years since they've actually had breakfast and been up in the morning. But again, that's just like little nitpicky stuff. Like, it was still a really good episode. I love this stuff with Nadja and the Rat Pack. I thought it was so funny. And when Matt Berry, this line just kills me. It's just like Matt Berry comes in, he sees like Frank Sinatra, who's just like this random Asian guy, which is like really funny. And then Matt Berry just says like, "Pardon me, Mr. Sinatra, like, I don't recall you being Chinese." And then he just says, "Ring a ding ding," and then he goes, "My apologies, my mistake. I must have been mistaken." And it's just such like a funny like line that I just had to watch back. And again, overall, it was just like a fun episode. It was so cool to see Nandor just like gambling and just like getting mad at the game. I think he say this fucking game at one point or something like that.
Oh, I think he does. Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, or like I think he goes like, "This fucking guy." And he just gets really upset. And then in the next episode, we'll talk about that one line he does. But yeah, it was overall really fun. And I kind of found it cute that Guillermo just like, it was just like, obviously like it's really good quality. So it was an actual camera. But the joke is that he just is recording on his like iPhone and he's like, "Hey, like I'm here in London." Like, and then that's how they just deal with it real fast, is like him going out. And then it's also funny that I forgot the neighbor's name in it, but it's just funny that he has Sean and Laszlo have like this weird kinship that's always like really funny to revisit. And it's just it's just great that he just takes Sean's like credit card and then just uses that to get plane tickets for Guillermo and like hotel rooms and everything. But then at the end, it's like, again, like you were saying, it does feel a little condensed because the last like 5 minutes is just like Ocean's 11. It just like goes hardcore into like a heist to get all the money back for Sean. And it is a really funny heist, which concludes with someone's head just getting blown off.
Shockingly.
Shockingly. So my mouth was wide open when this series gets very like bloody. It just like goes for it. And I absolutely love that about this series.
Yeah, I think to that point, that is why I kind of wanted to spread this out over 2 episodes, is because just like, you could do a whole Ocean's 11 episode, you know, in and of itself. Like that could be a whole 15-minute portion of the second episode, you know?
Because they wanted to focus on like the normal casino stuff, but then they also wanted to do a heist film. So it's like, just do 2 different episodes, like you were saying. Don't like try to condense it in one. But still, it was like really tight and really funny.
Yeah, it's a really great episode. I'm getting all the complaints out of the way early because I do love this episode and it's so funny. And I think it's, of these 3 episodes, it has the most lines that are quotable, just the most funny lines. So to the writer of this particular episode and to the entire writer's room, really good job, because there's just a bunch of good lines. Like when Colin Robinson is at the dinner table when they're all having dinner early on and they're talking with Guillermo and they're trying to get him to talk about like his personal life. And Colin Robinson says, "Come on, you stinky bitch. The library is open." Like, what?
Yeah, that's a good one.
Just stuff like that. Or Nandor saying, "I present you with the feather of a female crow," to the guy who brings up their luggage. Like, just really good. When Laszlo turns into a sparrow and he goes, "A fucking sparrow, the lamest of birds." Just a bunch of good quotes. Bunch of really good quotes. My only other issue with the episode, very tiny little nitpick. Little tiny baby nitpick. Was that all the dirt that they had? If they had more dirt, why didn't Guillermo just go back to their house and grab more dirt there?
That is a good, like, cinema sins, like, why not do this? But at the end of the day, like, who cares? It was funny to see Guillermo go all the way to like England and Europe and just visit their familiar lands. familial lands. And yeah, it was just funny. I don't know, but I totally get what you're saying. Like, they should have way more dirt, because like if you make them move from Europe to the United States, like you'd have definitely like a box full of it or something. And again, it's like if you need that to survive. And again, the more we watch sitcoms and the more we analyze them and think about structure and stuff, it's just like, oh, they just did that because it'd be funny, and like they literally just made up the dirt thing like this episode.
Right.
So,
and it does lead to one of my favorite line deliveries of the episode when Guillermo's on the plane coming back after he's gotten all 3 bags of dirt. He says, I got them all. 1, 2, 3. And then the cart comes by and asks if he wants anything. He goes, no, thanks.
And again, I think the best part about this episode in comparison to all the other ones is that the whole crew is just like together this time. It's not like they're separated or anything. And it's great to see just shots of the crew together. And especially that sequence where they do the heist and get all the money. That's just fantastic. And again, it climaxes in the best way with just a guy's head getting just punched off. And everyone being like, holy shit.
Yeah, no, it's genuinely shocking. I actually was like, oh, like I made a noise when I saw it because it kind of really shocked me, but it was really funny. And this episode does a really good job of just like pulling everything back together. All of the little jokes that they set up in the beginning come back. And that's just, you know, obviously good TV sitcom writing, but like with Nadja being so in love with the Rat Pack the whole time and telling that story about how she always liked to sing that line, ain't life a kick in the head. And then being able to bring that back at the end. All the stuff with Laszlo and Sean, help him with his gambling addiction. Also, Sean is literally a Tim Robinson character, like the Tim Robinson character from the Lady Luck characters episode.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Like to a T. But yeah, it's what I think the thing that I enjoy most about this episode, like we talked about with our review of Kicking and Screaming, it's just a bunch of like really great moments and scenes and sketches and skits and stuff. And that's what I really enjoyed about this is I think that they, even though I started off by saying that there was even more opportunity with a casino setting, they still hit so much of it. They should be very proud of themselves. I think that they accomplished a lot. And it is sort of like a bottle episode. You just get to just send the crew off somewhere else and go do something else. They make a joke about it at the beginning too, with like Kristen Shaw's character being like, you have so much important work to do and you're going to go on a vacation. And they're like, yeah, who cares? And then they go on a little vacation and it's really fun. And
they switch up the opening credits.
Yes, good point. And also it starts off with Matt Berry actually like playing it on the piano, and then Natasha Dimitri was like twerking to it before the new credit sequence starts. Also, just one more thing I want to highlight. We've talked about Nandor and Guillermo's relationship so far this season because I think they've been chipping away at that and digging into that a little bit more. And they do that a little bit more in this episode too. They start to hint towards Guillermo's sexuality at that dinner table scene. Yeah. Because they ask him, like, Nadja asks him, do you have a chubby little girlfriend? He's like, why does she have to be chubby? And then they start to tease him like, oh, maybe a boyfriend. And then Laszlo's like, it doesn't matter. Like, sex is just sex. And like, talk about your sexuality. And then Guillermo is about to start talking about it and then is interrupted. And then it's never brought up again in that episode. But he starts to say, like, when he was 10 or 11, he realized he was something. And so we don't know what that something is yet, but they're definitely playing with this idea through the season. And I think it's really interesting. And whether he's gay or whether he's asexual or whether he's trans or something else, it would be very cool if in his mind it was a big deal. And through, this is going to sound so stupid, but through looking at life as a vampire, he realizes it's not significant. Like it's just like, it's all fluid, you know? And I think that could actually be like an interestingly progressive message for like a vampire TV sitcom, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And that would be interesting. We'll see where that goes. Cause they have been hinting at it a lot throughout this season, and we'll just see where it goes. It was also just a funny bit where they realized they just don't ask Guillermo questions about anything. So they were all like really excited to be like, so what's going on with you? And they all have that like cadence to their voice where it's like they don't really care, but they're like trying to force themselves to care.
Do you have interests?
Yeah, it was really fun. Yeah, do you have interests like Guillermo?
And Colin Robinson, his interests are staring and walking around. Just a really good Colin Robinson this episode.
Yeah. I mean, Colin Robinson is always really funny. But yeah, overall, big thumbs up for The Casino.
Yeah.
A lot of fun. And we'll move on to the next episode, which I predict is both of our of the week. But I think it was still pretty good. I liked it more than the Gale episode. I'm not saying that was a horrible episode at all, but I'm just saying when they put werewolves in it, it's always kind of bad. But I don't know. I was at a party and they were telling me that the movie's way better, and I was like, I disagree.
Did you send them the link to this podcast?
No, but I should have. But yeah, season 3, episode 5 is the next episode we'll be talking about. It's called The Chamber of Judgment. Justice is served both vampirically and also in small claims court. So this episode is a big Matt Berry episode, which I love.
Of course.
I think Laszlo's my personal favorite character. I also love The Toast of London. We'll never talk about it and no one will watch it, but it is a great series if you haven't checked it out. It also isn't a great series. I just like it a lot. For some reason, it hits a chord with me. That was my small review of Toast of London. But The Chamber of Judgment, pretty good episode. But probably the weakest of the two. So this episode, again, I already read the description. But again, it's a lot more like Nadja and Nandor fighting over things. It's a lot of Guillermo. In the next 2 episodes, we'll talk about this. It's a lot of Guillermo trying to take power in some funny ways. And I think in this episode, it actually works kind of well. In the next episode, there was just one scene where I'm like, I don't love this for Guillermo. But we'll talk about this episode. Derek comes back. He was a vampire hunter. And then with Craig Robinson, funnily enough, I forgot he was in the series. Right. He's not in this episode, but Derek comes back, and he got turned into a vampire because they left him behind that last time. And it was just really funny to see a contemporary's view of he used to be a vampire hunter, but now he's just a vampire, so he has to live. And everyone just says he sucks as a vampire because he's just trying to do Renaissance era / Victorian vampire stuff. And everyone's like, no, you have to be cool. If you want to be, the main thing they were saying to him was if you want to be a vampire, you have to be cool and not let everyone know you're a vampire. Which was kind of funny. And then there's some good Sean stuff in this episode too with Laszlo. I just want to touch on, this is my favorite, honestly, maybe my favorite bit of the 3 episodes, even though this was my least favorite one. Him and Sean were outside, and then Sean's like you got to do something for me, Laz. And then Laszlo comes up close to him he's gonna kiss him, and he's like, oh yeah, sure. He's like, I'll fuck you. And then Sean's like, whoa, no, I don't do that. And then immediately Laszlo's just you'll forget everything. He's just so immediate. He's so embarrassed by it. And whenever the vampires get embarrassed like normal people do, it's always so sweet because unlike us, they can actually fix it with just hypnotizing the person and being you'll forget everything. And then with Sean, it's just he got a bunch of pillows. He bought a bunch of pillows, which is funny because it's after the episode he's gambling a bunch. But he bought a fuck ton of pillows, so now he has to sell them to his friends. And that sequence was pretty funny as well, because Colin Robinson is also just great in that scene where he's just trying to be boring and everyone's just sit down, relax. But yeah, overall, decent episode. I just thought it was missing something big.
Yeah, overall, it's a good episode. I think that to a point that Jack made on our last podcast about the idea of humorous versus funny, I found a lot of this episode to be humorous, stuff that I sort of lightly chuckled at or smiled at or thought was intellectually funny, but didn't totally hit my funny bone. And for me, that's sort of the Laszlo and Sean subplot. It's a very funny idea of a guy invites all of his friends over and tries to pawn off all of these pillows that he made a terrible investment on back to them. And that was a humorous idea, mixing in all the Colin Robinson stuff and Laszlo having Sean as his best friend is really funny. Just again, conceptually, It's not that Laszlo is Sean's best friend. It's the other way around, that Laszlo keeps saying Sean is my best friend and I have to help him, which is really funny.
Yes.
But so all of that is conceptually very funny, and it leads to an awesome like courtroom scene, which is really funny. It also pays off with Derek in the after credit scene. But yeah, all of that was like very humorous and very clever and is funny objectively, but just did not make me like laugh out loud. That's why I found the episode to be, you know, not quite top tier, but more closer to mid tier. But all that stuff is really funny.
Objectively, it's like really good writing because you introduce everything and it all comes together at the end, like in a fun way. Exactly.
No, yeah, it's very good. And there's like little small moments that are sprinkled in there that are just really funny too. I mean, again, speaking to Sean and how he's basically a Tim Robinson character, just like
he is,
yeah. He's just like you don't even have to use these pillows. You just buy more and sell them to your dumb friends, and then make a little do re mi on the side. It's just like he's just like really going for it, and I love that.
Yeah. Well, what's funny is like in an alternate universe, Tim Robinson just plays Sean.
Yeah,
and he doesn't have his own. Because in that alternate universe, Tim Robinson isn't like as amazing as he is in this universe where he can like make a show. In this one, he's just like an actor. But like, again, it is a Tim Robinson character. You're like 100% right. And it's like just really funny because it's just like, he just looks like a guy. And it's just funny that Laszlo has him as his best friend. Like you keep saying, it's so funny. And again, when he tries to kiss him, it's so good.
And it's funny too because like Sean like functionally gives nothing to Laszlo. Like Laszlo gains nothing out of this friendship, and that's why it's even funnier too that he loves Sean. It's just that they are neighbors and that they occasionally talk to each other, and like that's enough for Laszlo. Because also a lot of Laszlo's character is like being deferential to like all the things that are around him. So when he is interested in something, it's also extra funny because often he just doesn't care. Like when in episode, I think it was 2, when Guillermo falls out of the ceiling because he has escaped from the like little familiar area that he was supposed to be in. Laszlo doesn't care. Like he's just reading pornography. Like who cares, you know?
Yeah.
But when he cares about things and when he cares about people, it's just extra funny. That's why Jackie Daytona was so funny, is because he invested in this group of people for no real reason. But he did.
But he was like so into it.
Yeah, he really got into it.
Normal human bartender. And let's talk about him being a lawyer.
Yeah, great.
Because that was just a really fun thing that they, again, what the beauty of this show is like they can just reveal things about the character and be like, oh, this was just always a thing. You just didn't know it.
Because they've lived for so long.
Because they lived for so long and they lived like 40 lifetimes. So they literally did do everything. And it's just really funny that he like dresses up in the whole like old get up of like a lawyer with like the wig and like the robe and everything. And it was just also really funny where everyone's just like, yeah, he's just like a little, he's a little rusty. And then it like kept him being like, may I approach the bitch?
What did you say?
What did you say? He said, may I approach the bench?
What did you think I said?
What did you think I said? Matt Berry again, we've always talked about this. We've never said it on mic, but Matt Berry is so like one note in the most perfect way that he like always hits like these highs that are just like fucking Sparrow or like may I approach the bitch, and it's like so good and he's so fucking funny. And whenever he has these moments like this, it's just like it's beautiful to see. And I think that's why as we talk about this episode more, like I think it was the most forgettable, but with the Matt Berry stuff at the end, it was still pretty funny. And then when he goes in drunk and he's trying to let Derek free is just like it's a good moment. And again, it's good TV writing that wraps around at the end of the episode.
It also has one of the funniest lines of these 3 episodes when he's talking about how he was on the Queen's Court mostly for defending himself for soliciting and for pornography. And he continues to go on to say he's defended mostly hogs and horses. Again, it's just like incredible work by these writers to just come up with the most insane stuff. I've defended mostly hogs and horses. Moving off of that subplot and back into the Derek stuff, I really love Derek. I think that actor is just really good. I think he just has an interesting like presence. Just like a very natural performer. And so I love him coming back in, and I do love him just being a bad vampire and just constantly botching it. Like he has an opportunity to defend his life and he's like, no, I think this is just who like I am. I think I just like do shitty stuff now.
And Guillermo's
like, please stop. But
and
then
it's really funny to see his costume in this episode too. It's just so ridiculous.
And also him being in the chamber with the sun shining in and burning himself 3 times is just classic comedy. Very funny, classic comedy.
Yeah.
2 things that I found from this episode. One is quite obvious, but I haven't articulated it before, so I'll just say it out loud, is the very opening of this episode is so efficient. Within 45 seconds, we've already had 2 funny jokes and like we know all the characters and where they're going. And the reason for that is because the format of the documentary style sitcom is like the most efficient comedic and storytelling version of a sitcom, because you can just talk directly to camera, get the exposition out of the way within 5 to 10 seconds, and then you have more room for jokes. Which is why I think this show is so awesome, is because they could get that done super fast and then just go straight for jokes. And because of that, they have a higher like joke output than most sitcoms do, I think. Or at least they have a higher output of successful jokes because they don't have to work in the plot as much into the humor, you know? If it happens naturally. But it's mostly just like the characters being very funny in reaction to everything else that's happening, instead of like having to use a lot of that dialogue to set up what's happening within the plot. So that's just something that this episode particularly made me realize. And then the other thing is just that I love the world building that the show is doing. We mentioned this a little bit already, but like bringing Derek back in, I love the Hellhound, the other 2 vampires that they have in the interrogation, or what the vampiric council room. All of that stuff is really good.
But no, it's great. And again, it's always good to see Kristen Schaal in it. Like a lot of fun. And yeah, again, I think she just adds a lot to the world building, and we'll talk about it in the next episode, especially with the gargoyles. But yeah, no, pretty solid episode all around. Also love Guillermo trying to like get the throne for some random reason. We'll talk about that briefly because Harvey Guillen is just so good as this character. And this really encapsulates him, where he's trying to get like Nandor and Nadja to do what he wants.
Yeah.
And, you know, Nadja wants to sit on the throne. Nandor wants to sit on the throne. They even have a funny moment where they pull the throne back and it just horribly scratches the floor, which is great. And then again, Guillermo gets what he wants. He gets to be on the throne for some reason. And then again, he tries to do it at the end of the episode. and and then he's just like, yeah, Nandor, it's weird that Nadja made you kill Derek. And he's like, what are you talking about? That didn't happen. And then he tries to do the same thing with Nadja, except reversed. And then she's like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, this is like, none of this happened. And then he's like, I guess it doesn't always work. And that's just like really encapsulates Guillermo, because like he is very competent and he is very smart.
Yeah.
But sometimes he's just like too smart for his own good, really. Like, and it just doesn't work.
Yeah, it's really fun to see him trying to pull the strings, because he's been doing that a little bit throughout the series, because he does have Nandor's ear throughout the entire series, but now he's like really playing it up. And now that Nandor is somebody and Nadja is somebody, because they are the co-leaders, as they keep reminding each other, of the Vampiric Council, now it like matters. And now he's starting to see like, oh, this is actually like a real opportunity for me, because they won't turn me into a vampire. Maybe this is my way to getting there, you know? So yeah, love Guillermo in this episode. I think he was a little jaded in the casino episode, which makes sense because like they were just like demeaning him and making him feel small the entire episode. But yeah, when he's super jaded and when he isn't thrilled to be around, it's not quite as funny as when like he's jaded, but he finds some sort of purpose in serving them or in trying to get something done. And in this episode, he has that glimmer in his eye, that little twinkle in his eye, that like he could be a part of this world. And that's what makes him so great, is because he is not a part of this world, but he wants to be so badly. Yeah. So yeah, really good Guillermo episode. Again, we already mentioned it, but this fucking guide just killed me at the beginning of the episode. I love that that's his catchphrase. I love that he has a catchphrase. It's like it's so silly. It's so sitcom-y, but it totally works, and it's really funny. And last thought on this episode for me is just, I like how even in the comedic moments, they're revealing that the differences in leadership style between Nadja and Nandor. When they see the first vampire, Nadja is like, oh, let's definitely kill him. Nandor's like, shouldn't we do something a little bit less severe? And then they decide to put him in a dungeon. And even then it's like, Nadja says 500 years. He says 100. Guillermo's like 200 would have been fine. All of that is like just really good. And it's setting up for like more serious stuff in the future also. Cause at some point this is going to come to a head and it's going to probably be a big deal at the end of the season.
Yeah. Nadja versus Nandor. Going to be very, very interesting. But yeah, I similarly agree with your thoughts. And the more I think about this episode, the more I actually like it. I think
I think so too.
It was I think it's 3 for 3 this week. I think they're all really good episodes. And again, it's great to see the crew together. I feel like Colin Robinson, he's gonna get his episode like pretty soon, I think. But it is kind of disappointing sometimes when we're talking about a full episode and I realized we haven't talked about Colin Robinson. And I think it just came from, he just didn't have like a huge role in this episode, and it's fine, but he always has like good one-liners. And, again, I feel like he's like 100% in the main cast, but typically on posters, he's like, if there's going to be one left out of the main 5, it's always him.
Yeah.
But I just love Colin Robinson. Shout out to that. All right, so the last episode we're going to talk about, my favorite of this little batch of episodes, we're going to talk about season 3, episode 6, The Escape. An ancient beast escapes and threatens the existence of all vampires everywhere. Very simple plot. It's the inciting incident is that Nadja forgot to tell Nandor to feed the sire, which is like the most ancient vampire ever, who made the first vampire. So technically every vampire's life is at stake if the sire dies. And that's really great. And there's a fun reappearance of the Baron, who we briefly talked about in our first episode here. And again, really fun stuff, because the beauty of like adding more plot elements, this is why I liked this episode more than the casino, because the casino just kind of feels like it shoehorned the ancestral dirt underneath the coffin thing.
Right.
But with the escape, they're like, all right, if the sire dies, then like every vampire dies because he made the first vampire and he's technically the grandfather of vampires. And you'd be like, wait a second, but the Baron turned Nadja and Laszlo into vampires. So if he dies, like, shouldn't they be dead already too? And they just bring him back because it's just really fun. And there is a moment like in that episode where he dies where like his eyes glow red when they like dump some stuff on him and then throw him in. But again, Doug Jones just does such a great job this episode. I like love that vampire so much. His voice is so great. And even his like body language, even though he has one arm and like no body and just a head, his body language is so impeccable. And he just gives such a good performance. And it's nice that he's back now. And then by the end of the episode, the Baron, the Sire, and the Hellhound from the last episode, which is just a golden retriever, are all living together, like under supervision in like a cabin. That's an Airbnb. And it's like really great. I don't know. It's just a lot of fun. And I did really like this episode. And it's always fun to see like immortal beings be like scared of their mortality, and that's what happened this entire episode. And then it's also great that Colin Robinson's just like, this doesn't really affect me all that much, and that's like great too. So what do you think of this episode, Dan?
This is one of the best episodes of the series. I love this episode so much because I think it marries character and plot and action and set design and character design and all of it's just like a really perfect episode of what we do in the shadows. Starting with the Baron, that as a subplot really works for me because it's motivated by the A plot. It's not just a random made up thing. That's why in episode 5, the subplot is Laszlo and Colin Robinson going over to their friend's house. And then that turns into the pillow thing, which turns into the court thing, which is like funny and fine, but it's sort of just made up out of thin air. So it can kind of feel like they just randomly decided that this was the subplot. But this subplot only happens because of the A plot. So it all feels a little bit more interconnected from the start. And which I tend to find more compelling. It usually is just like, oh yeah, that makes more sense to my brain. So because they make the realization that if the sire dies, they would all die. That means the Baron dies. They should be dead. And they freak out. They run back to the house. They try to dig him up. And then we just get, like you said, we get Doug Jones back. And after I go through it a little bit more, I do just want to talk about Doug Jones specifically, because like something that I don't know, I don't think any podcast on the internet would talk about this very much, but like posture is one of the most underrated aspects of character. And Tyler, you've talked to me about this before, just about like status in character as well. And I think that really affects posture tremendously. The physicality of Doug Jones, and like you said, even though he's just a half a body, his posture and his physicality is so unique to that character, and it's so well informed, and it's just like really good acting. So we'll talk about that later. But that whole
and also like Doug Jones, like if you don't know who Doug Jones is, like you actually have seen him in a lot of movies. You just don't know it's him. He always just has a ton of makeup on, and he's one of the best with like prosthetics. He's great in the Hellboy movies, and he's also great in, I don't think this movie's great within itself, but I think he's really good in The Shape of Water. And he plays the monster in that, and it's just great. He's just always, I mean, he's so lanky and like fluid with all his movements that like when he like commits to something, it's pretty spectacular.
I guess we'll just do it now because I love him. But it's like he and Andy Serkis are two of the most underrated actors because they have stuff on top of them. And so people don't even think of it as acting. It's hard to tell like how much of the performance is the performance and how much of it is the makeup or the CG or whatever. But if you watch any featurettes of like Andy Serkis as Caesar in the Planet of the Apes movies, like it's all Andy Serkis. And everything that they animate on top of it is based off of his performance. So everything you're seeing is like a really remarkable, transcendent performance. And it's the same thing with Doug Jones. Like acting is not just line delivery. It's not just what you do with your face. It's the physicality. It's the posture. It's status. It's like so many other things that like most people when they review a movie don't talk about, because most people who review movies don't know anything about acting or about filmmaking. They just know what they like. And I'm not blaming them for that. You know, not everyone knows craft, and that's fine. But like Doug Jones is a master craftsman of acting. And it's so cool that we just get to have him in the show now. I loved having him in the first season. And when he died, I was so sad. I mean, it made a lot of sense. It was one of those things that like had to happen for the show to continue. But now that he's in it, we can always just have him in an episode or two every season. We could just check in on him. And that's awesome because he's so good. And his vocal performance is great. His physicality is great. I love that he's a charred half a person now, because that leads to funny stuff like him riding on the Hellhound in this episode. Everything that he's doing in this episode is really great. It's nice to have him back. It was a really good B plot. And again, it all comes full circle. It all becomes really interconnected by the end, because the A plot informs the B plot, and then the B plot solves the A plot at the end, because it's him that can speak the same language as the sire, and that de-escalates the situation. So all of it like really connects like a perfect puzzle. Yeah, 100%. And there's a great moment too. And again, we'll talk about little moments throughout. We've been doing this the whole time, but when the Baron comes back, and then Nandor's telling Guillermo how like good he is at like killing vampires, and then the Baron's like, oh, like who? And then like Nandor's like, oh, well, he killed you. And then like everyone's like, and then he's like, he killed Eugene the vampire, a very powerful vampire.
And then the Baron's just like, oh yeah, Eugene. Just so funny. And again, the scene I was alluding to a little earlier, when like Guillermo is just like telling everyone what to do, and then he's all it's I don't know why this bothered me. I just like the shoes Laszlo was wearing, I think, but like Guillermo's like, you need to change your shoes, Laszlo, and he's like, what, these? And they're like bright red, and they like look really cool. But I think I'm just being too harsh on it. It's like, it is just very funny when Guillermo takes control, because like, again, like we've talked about this whole series, like Guillermo's the only mortal one, which means like everything has stakes for him.
Right.
Like for the vampires, the only thing that has stakes for them is that if they all die because of this one random thing.
Like stakes.
Which might be the dirt. or stakes. Yeah, exactly. The only stakes they have is like their like maybe death, but like besides that, they don't really care. But Guillermo does care about a lot of things. So it is really cool when he just like takes control of things because, again, like you said, he's our eyes and he's like the voice of humanity in it. And he's probably one of the only characters in the series that will never get what he wants the most, which also makes him the most endearing. Like he's never going to be a vampire. Like, I'm going to say that right now. Like, and again, it's like that thing we talk about in TV shows, how like you want to have your characters never get what they actually want.
Right.
They get what they need, but they might not get what they want. And like a good example of a show that doesn't do that is House of Cards. And we always talk about it, just how Frank Underwood becomes president. Spoilers for House of Cards if like anyone still wants to watch that. But Frank Underwood gets his goal of becoming president at the end of the second season. And then from there, he just becomes a boring character because that's all the power he can get, you know? And like, I don't know, in Game of Thrones, they say like the most powerful person is the person next to the throne. And again, I wish the House of Cards did that more. Anyways, that is just my brief rant on giving characters what they want. But that's what makes Guillermo one of the most interesting for me because he's just never going to get what he wants.
I totally agree. And I think that's a good point about he has the stakes because he could die. And so when he puts himself in harm's way at the end of the episode in front of the hockey net, it's like, oh, Guillermo really, like he's really driven and he really cares about this community and this family that he's built. And it makes that even 10 times more funny when they belittle him and treat him like dirt throughout the series, is because like he cares so much. He's putting his life on the line constantly. I think we've become sort of accustomed to this by now, but like in the first season, it was a big deal that he was just out and about with other vampires. There were moments where like other vampires would try to drink his blood or something, and then they'd have to step in. Nandor would have to step in and say, no, that's my familiar. Don't drink his blood. Like it's dangerous to be Guillermo. And especially in this episode when they're going up against a animal monster creature thing, incredibly well designed. This is definitely the most expensive episode of the season.
Yeah.
Because they have a bunch of sets. They have the gargoyles. They have all these characters. They bring Doug Jones back. They have this giant ancient vampire creature that is a puppet thing. Let's just talk about the Sire for a second. All the stuff with the Sire is awesome because they set it up earlier this season. It kind of just seemed like he was going to be like a spooky ghost almost. Like it just because when Colin Robinson opens up the trap door, or not the trap door, but the little slot in the door, when he opens that up, it's just like a bunch of wind blows out. And I got the impression that it was just kind of going to be a dusty vampire or something. But no. We see him this episode and he's a giant gargoyle-ish monster.
Yes.
Which is so great. And seeing him roam around in that warehouse, like sports basement type store, is just awesome.
Yeah, no, certainly. It's a very cool design, and I love when things like look older. Like obviously, like that was like a physical puppet type thing. At least that's what it looked like to me. Probably some CG in it. Probably someone inside the thing too. But it did remind me of like the stuff in the Labyrinth. That David Bowie
shout out,
Frank Oz movie. But yeah, no, just like stuff like that just is so fun to see nowadays, especially where it's not just like a CGI or like just a bunch of, like makeup. I was expecting an old dusty vampire of like someone who's like kind of famous or something,
right.
Like making an appearance, but like we've already seen that with the Baron. So like, why do that again? Like it's fun when what we do in the shadows, like kind of pushes the envelope. Like even in the last episode with Derek, it's like we've seen someone transform into a vampire, but we haven't seen like an awkward guy like Derek become a vampire. And the reason vampires hate him is because he's not cool.
Right.
Like that's very funny. And like what's her Jonah Hill's sister?
Oh,
in
Beanie
the
Feldstein.
First season? Yeah, Beanie Feldstein is like similar to it, but again, it's a different type of it. It's just like similar ideas, but like they expand on it in interesting ways, which is cool. And that's with the Sire and the Baron. Because like when they were setting up the Sire at the beginning of this season, I was like, didn't we already see this with like the Baron? Like I feel like feel like we've been there, done that, but they did it in a fun way, and like it brought something new to the table. And if anything, it is kind of a risk because it is easy to do that old vampire thing. I mean, they do it in the TV show too, and then they burn him alive, which is really funny. But again, it's great to see when what we do in the shadows just like does something fun and new. Do we have more to say? Yeah, keep going.
Well, I think the same could be said about the gargoyles. Like, it's just a funny, weird, bold choice. And again, just more world building. This episode just introduces a whole bunch of the pieces. And I mean, before I talk about the gargoyles, just the hero shot of all of these vampires walking down the road, trying to find the sire. From left to right, you have like Laszlo and Nadja and Nandor and Guillermo. And then you have Kristen Shaw's character, and you have the Baron riding a hellhound. Just like this show is insane. I love it. And then you get these gargoyles, and these gargoyles are just, as they referred to them, as gossipy bitches. And that's again just really funny. And I love their banter there. I hope we get to come back to them and see them a few more times in the series. But just a couple more like fun, silly things that happened in the episode. The press conference bit is so good on a number of levels. One, it's just funny because it's Nandor having to be the leader and step in front of a bunch of vampiric press people and address an issue. So it's funny on that level, but it's also funny on the level that like we've been seeing a bunch of like bad apologies and press conferences over the last few years. And it very much mimics that, where like he just botches it. And then at the end, when they come down the stairs and they basically do the boys, we got 'em. Basically mimicking that, and like the stone cold nature of them saying we got him. Just really, really funny. A bunch of stuff working on several levels.
And the last thing I'll say about this episode is that I was so satisfied with this episode / ending that I'm like, oh, this could have been the finale.
Yeah.
Like, I would have been fine if this was the end of season 3. It really felt like a finale because like a lot of stuff came together. They introduced like, again, they wrapped it up pretty nicely with the Baron and the Sire and the Hound living together. And then like the last bit was just like, oh, they're going to eat people because that's what they do. But yeah, it was just a great episode. And like, I'm shocked that like we're only 6 episodes in. Like we have 4 more episodes to go, which is like super exciting.
Which leads me to believe that, because our prediction last time was that maybe something was brewing in the background because it seemed a little too easy for Nandor, Nadja, and Laszlo and Guillermo and Colin Robinson to get away with what they got away with at the end of season 2. So that leads me to believe that sort of stuff is going to be coming in these back 4 episodes, that there's going to be more heavy consequences for their actions. Or maybe the inverse happens. Maybe now that Nandor steps up to the plate, delivers a press conference, finds the sire, maybe now they're going to be crowned as like really good leaders, and maybe it grows from there. I don't know, but I do think more of like the big picture stuff is going to come in these last 4 episodes.
Certainly. We'll see how it all goes. But yeah, very excited about the next few episodes. This overall I thought was a really good batch of episodes, which is good for the middle of a season. You don't want to get slow. You don't want to slow down. And I really enjoyed it. The next 3 episodes we're going to be talking about is in like 2-3 weeks, in 3 weeks, I guess, are episodes 7 through 9, and they're entitled The Siren, The Wellness Center, and A Farewell. So we'll see how they all go. I'm excited about it. And any last things on this batch of what we do in the Shadow episodes?
It just continues its reign as the king of all TV comedies. It's so absurd. It's so silly. It's great with world building. The characters are well defined, really good arcs. I think that this is a show that could be studied in colleges if you wanted to learn how to do TV sitcom writing. I think it's just a very good, clever reinvention of a sitcom without, having to actually reinvent the wheel. It's just different enough. Overall, an excellent television show that continues to get better, which is very hard to do for especially a sitcom, but generally for any kind of a show. So my hat's off so far through these first 6 episodes.
Hats off to them. Last thing, do you think Simon the Devious is going to appear in this season?
Hell yes. I think he has to show up at least once every season. Big Nick Kroll guy here.
Big Nick Kroll guy. It would be funny if Again, the first 2 seasons, they just have 2 hat episodes, and Nick Kroll is just in both of them. And it's just really funny that they're just... And also the joke in the second season was just like, it's not going to be just all about the hat again. And then at the very end, they're like, oh, it's just about the hat, huh? And he's like, yeah, it's only about the hat.
Maybe that'll be the farewell episode.
Maybe that'll be a farewell episode. Yeah, we'll see. Well, we'll be checking in about 3 weeks again. And thank you guys so much for watching and listening to our podcast. And this has been another installment of our What We Do in the Shadows podcast for the Nothing Notable podcast. Thank you guys so much, and we'll see you next time.
You're dead, you're dead, you're dead, you're dead and out of this world.